Hello, lifers. Welcome back to the podcast. This is the Live the Life podcast. I am your host, Eric Aroka. And today is an exciting day because we have our first guest with us today. First ever guest on the Live the Life podcast. Super excited. So when I made out my list a few months ago of people that I wanted to have on the podcast, this guest was right at the top of the list. And I'm super excited. So without further ado, I just want to welcome my dear friend, Cheryl Knowlton, to the Live the Life podcast. Cheryl, congratulations. You're the first guest.
I feel like I won the lottery, Eric. Holy cow. I knew that I was among the first, but I had no idea I was the first. What the heck? That's amazing.
You are the first. So super excited to have you on. Now, on last week's episode, I did warn all of our lifers out there that when you came on the podcast, I wanted them to have their caffeine shots, their energy drink boosts, whatever it is they do to get their energy up. There you go. Your 5-hour energy, whatever you do, make sure that is high up there, because one of the things that you're going to quickly learn about Cheryl is she is high energy. And so, Cheryl, I've been prepping, getting myself psyched up all week just to be able to match your energy because, hey, you know how it is. But super excited to have you on with us, Cheryl. Thank you so much for your willingness. And I know you're so busy, but super excited to have you on the podcast. Cheryl, so I know you really well. So tell our listeners a little bit about you.
Oh my gosh. Where do I begin? That's a great question. Born and raised in the California Bay Area. Something significant about me is that I was adopted when I was 6 weeks old, and interesting childhood that we can talk about on another episode, potentially, as we talk about overcoming adversity and difficult things. Married the man I thought was the man of my dreams. He was the father of my 4 daughters. And I knew when we got married that he had bipolar disorder, Eric, but I was very young and very naive. And I thought love would conquer all and I could do anything. And that was ultimately not the case. And we'll talk more about that as part of our conversation today. Fast forward family wise, today, all of my daughters are adults. They all are married. They all have children of their own. And watching them parent my amazing, perfect grandchildren is pretty much the very best thing in the history of ever.
Isn't that great? I love that too. That's a great great part of life.
It's the best. 14 grandchildren. 23 years ago, married my Prince Charming, my second husband, my fabulous husband, Rick, and he is my biggest cheerleader and my greatest supporter. And as I travel around the United States and Canada speaking, he often comes with me, often drives me. And we love to have adventures with our dog, Scooby, who just turned 3.
Excellent. Yeah, Rick's a great guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting Rick and speaking to him, getting to know him a little bit. Great guy. So and I think I've met one or two of your daughters too, just like in passing. But yeah, you seem to have a wonderful family. Now, something interesting about you as well is that you are all about Disney, right?
I am all about Disney. Yes, I am.
I love that.
Yeah, I love Disney. That came about. I mentioned that I was adopted. My parents had tried for 13 years to have me. When they finally adopted me, Copernicus called and verified I was the center of their universe. And very sadly, very tragically, my angel mother passed away shortly before my 5th birthday. One of my dad's colleagues suggested to him that he take me to Disneyland, that it would be a place of healing for both of us. And Eric, you know what's funny? I totally forgot about that trip until a few years ago. My dad and I were talking, and I remembered he took me every 3 years on the money, every spring break, every 3 years, but I didn't remember that trip when I was 5. And he
Wow.
looked at me funny. I've had too much Botox to mimic how he actually looked at me at that time, but he was equal parts confused and intrigued. Like, do you really not remember that? And when he reminded me, it was like this cascading wave came over me, and I remembered, and it has been a place of healing and magic and happiness, and above and beyond just the go to escape or go for the magic. I love doing a deep dive into Walt Disney and all the hardship and tragedy that he faced, and how he used the power of innovation, and sheer grit and tenacity to create. And now the sun doesn't set on Disney theme parks, with the 6 being all over the world. And that's phenomenal to me, from the power of one man's imagination and his unwillingness to quit. It's incredible.
How many parks have you been to?
I've only been to 2. I've been to the 2 US theme parks, California and Orlando, and numerous times for both, but definitely on the wish list to hit them all, and definitely want to go to Paris next.
Yeah, wow, that would be pretty awesome. Yeah, that could be cool. That could be very cool.
Yeah.
Let's see, Paris. Let's see, Disneyland with a French accent.
Oui, oui.
That'd be kind of interesting, right? That'd be interesting. That would be fun, though. I think that would be a good time.
I think.
Okay, awesome. So, tell our listeners a little bit about. I want to hear, like, I want them to hear from your perspective about how we met.
Oh gosh, I love this story, how we met. So I've been a member of the National Speakers Association since 2009, joined both national and my local chapter, the Mountain West chapter, in 2009. And that's a long story in and of itself. But fast forward, it would have been our Get Paid to Speak event, for sure. And it was in May, and I remember the location. So I'm thinking it was 2021 when we did that. And it's our biggest event of the year. So by 21, let's see, I would have been May of 21. I was vice president at that time, and about to become president elect. And here was this total rock star, dressed to the nines, dapper as all get out, speaking on how to not look like a slob when you're on stage, but doing it in a gracious, lovely, fun, funny, high energy way. And I was absolutely like enthralled. And so that was Eric, in case you didn't guess. And he finished, and he walked to the back of the room, and I walked back there with my business card in my hand, back when we still had business cards back then. Remember that? I mean, it sounds like I'm talking about, remember when the television became not a piece of furniture that didn't have to be lifted by 6 men. Oh my gosh. I handed Eric my card, and I said, yeah, you don't know me, but we're going to be working together. I need you. I need to hire you, and right away. And so now you have to tell your part of the story.
Yeah, so I'll pick it up from right there. So let me give you a little bit of background. So I'd never met Cheryl at previous NSA events in Salt Lake City. I'd just always seen her. And to be honest, I was always a little bit intimidated.
Oh gosh.
And not in a bad way, right? Just in a very, in a good way. Like you're just so successful, and you're a real high energy and a people person. And I'm not a people person, right? I'm more introverted, and I'm happy with just sitting in the corner and canvassing the room that way. So Cheryl comes up to me and hands me her card and says, "Hey, we're gonna work together," or something to that effect. At which point I was very gracious, I think, and I just said, "Oh yeah, for sure. Let's get together. Let's talk. Whatever." I took your card, put it in my pocket, and then that was it. That was the last conversation you and I had that evening. And I called my wife right away, and I just said, she asked me how my presentation went. I said, "I think it went really well. Got a good reception. Got really good feedback from everybody." And I said, "Hey, you're not gonna believe this, but there's a lady. Her name is Cheryl Knowlton, And she's kind of one of those people that is just like way up here, right? Like her level is next level. And I said, she came up to me, gave me her card, said we're gonna work together. And I just said, I told my wife, I said, you know what? It'll probably never happen, right? And I was just like, I don't see her calling me to get to get how to dress tips, from me, sort of a thing. So I was just like, but it was really nice, and I had a great time. So that's kind of where the evening ended, right? We kind of both went our separate ways. But lo and behold, a couple of days later, true to her word, Cheryl Knowlton calls me on the phone and it's like, hey, we're going to work together. And I was floored. And my life has never been the same since. It has been even better than it already was. I love our friendship, and I love that I've been able to help you in your style and help you along the way. Now, I got to say also that our listeners actually don't know, all the lifers out there don't actually know that I'm also owner of my own, what do you call it? Fashion consulting agency called The Walking Fashion Show. So they don't know that about me. But now you do, all of you now. So that's why Cheryl is a client, and more importantly, a dear friend. And we've had a lot of fun together, right? I mean,
oh my gosh, we have had a lot of fun together in so many ways. Eric has been a guest on my podcast 3 different times. And a part of numerous events that I have chaired and been responsible for inside and outside National Speakers Association on really helping speakers to define their brand messaging through their style. Yeah. And I will embarrass the heck out of myself by admitting that when Eric and I started working together, he, just like everything he does, he was all in and took it very seriously. And he scrolled so far back in my social media, I think he got to my MySpace. Like he dug up my kindergarten picture practically and put together the slideshow of my tendency that was I was oblivious to, of my my love of the color black. And my joke about that is that I loved light black, but for variety, I went for dark black and medium black, and he showed it to me, and I couldn't unsee it, and showed me on my website, showed me on stage, and I started to recognize. I mean, this is a little bit emotional for me. I started to recognize at that point, okay, my brand up to that point had been real estate compliance speaking, very, very entrenched, very niched, depending on what part of the country your listeners are from. In Dynamite Productions, which is the name of my company, and my colors were black and white with a touch of red. And I was all in on the color scheme because I have a tendency to fall in love with mustard. And even if it's not on my food, that it will find me. And then if I'm about to go on stage, nobody wants to go on stage with mustard all over their shirt. It's just awkward, embarrassing. And so black would prevent those kinds of accidents and mishaps. And it was very much on brand for me at that time. But over the last couple of years, my brand has changed significantly. Yeah. And now I intentionally wore one of my favorite jackets in this color, in my magenta. And Eric was a big part of that brand transformation for me. And I'm so grateful for that. It was a personal transformation that resulted in the outward manifestation of the brand transformation, which resulted in ta-da, different colors.
There you go. Yeah. And it was a pleasure. I mean, talk about an honor in my, fashion career to help you in that transformation. So it was wonderful. I love that story. I love sharing that story with people just because I think it shows the power of making connections, and you never know, that next connection that you make, you never know how it's going to influence and impact your life. And so I'm so grateful for that. I was the first person on your podcast to be on 3 times, correct?
Yes, and you still are the only person who's been on 3 times. You hold the trophy, the Academy Award.
There we go. So we're going to make that happen here as well.
Yay!
Maybe not back to back to back, but we're definitely going to have you back. So, all right, awesome. Uh, Great getting to know you a little bit better. I think our listeners will really enjoy that, and they will love you. I think as much as I do. So,
Yay.
but let's get down to brass tacks. So here on the Live the Life podcast, we love to talk about those experiences in our lives that have transformed us. That while we're going through it, it may be a dark storm, but somehow, some way, we overcame. We beat the storm. We endured. We persevered. We were resilient. You pick any of those, hot topic words that are famous today. We did something to help us overcome. And so that's what I want you to share with our listeners today is what is that event? What were you going through at that moment? How did you feel? I want to know about the pain points that you had, but then also what are those strategies that you used to overcome that event in your life?
Woo, okay, buckle up, everybody. So yeah. Um, there are a number of events that we could talk about, but I think that the one that stands above the others in my mind is the moment that I decided to divorce my first husband, and which is why I brought him up and mentioned that. God bless his soul. He passed away in 2021. But yeah, I had my dad knew that my ex-husband was abusive, and my ex-husband was actually abusive to my dad. Slapped him across the face once, and it just, all those memories are so difficult and so painful, and I kept telling myself that it was going to get better, that just equal parts, let's get help and let's let unicorns fart rainbows all over the lawn, and polishing everything with positivity, and basically, not to be crass, but putting chocolate frosting and sprinkles on turds. It's still a turd underneath it, even though it might not look like it. And I worked very, very hard for my daughters, my 4 girls, to make everything look, and feel normal. Normal's a setting on the dryer, I've come to find out, by the way. Yeah. And endured that for a long, long time, many, many years. And I decided something happened when my youngest daughter was, she was a few months old, and the wheels really started to come off when I was pregnant with her. And I decided I was done, and I was going to move back to California. My dad, my family were elated. And at the last minute, my ex-husband asked, please, can I come with you? I'll repent, I'll change. And this is a key to the next piece of how did I get through it, was prayer. I don't know. I would never superimpose my religious beliefs on anyone, but my religious beliefs are very key to my life. They were then, they are now. And I prayed, and dang it, it wasn't time to be done yet. And so I let him come. And the 2 years we lived in California, some very important things happened, including increased time with my dad and with my stepmom and with other family members, which was really important and very helpful for me to build and strengthen the roots of me personally, so that I would have the strength to step out into the storm. I'm mixing my metaphors because trees don't step out into storms, but I think you get where I'm going with that. So yeah, you get where I'm going with that. So, and my dad, knowing what I was going through and how difficult it all was, he had told me that he was not going to financially rescue me. And it was living in California that I started my journey in the real estate space, and started making more money than I ever had, by a factor of a lot. And the company that I was working for was actually in Utah. And so the time was right, again, praying about it, that I was supposed to move back to Utah. My broker had offered me a corner office. He told me that he had been a Green Beret and that he would protect me when I was in that office. and said, I will not say this to you again. And I didn't understand the significance of that at that time, but I asked a colleague and she explained it to me. I didn't know how truly awesome Green Berets were at that point in time, but I figured that out pretty quickly. And he offered me health insurance and bought a house. And 3 weeks later, said a different prayer when some things were just going so badly. And for the first time, Eric, the prayer was answered in a different way. It was yes, it's time to be done. And so I remember standing there with my back literally against the wall, holding my youngest child who was screaming. And
of course, that's what they do, right?
right. Yep. And I said in my prayer, really? Did I hear that right? And the answer was yes, it's time to be done.
Wow.
And so I told him, I said, okay, I want to be done. And we shared an attorney, which is very rare, very unusual. It was uncontested. He wanted me to have full custody of the girls. He knew that I was an amazing mother. That was never, part of the issue. It was never part of the problem. Sure. And that was December 7th of 2000. And by January 30th, the judge signed it.
Oh, wow.
That's how fast it was. And it wasn't fast enough for me. Once I finally got the answer that it was time to be done, I'm like, all right, it's uncontested. Get that in front of the judge. Boom.
It's never fast enough at that point. Once you've made up your mind, it's an amazing thing what a made up mind will do, right?
Oh, yes.
It slows down time because you're just like, let's move along now. Like, I'm over this. Let's go.
Yeah, I
think that number one, my condolences. I think that it's never easy to lose someone that you've loved and that you have such a history with, even if things were not maybe perfect or ideal at any time in your relationship. So my condolences for that.
Thank you.
I think it's incredible that you bring up the power of prayer. Right. And like you said, I don't care what denomination you are, whether you believe in God or not. I think that there's a great deal of power in prayer. And I think it's really interesting, too, just listening to your story that you were blessed along the way with individuals in your life that helped you and kind of gave you maybe not the direction that you wanted. Right. I mean, it couldn't have been easy to move to California and to have your dad say, hey, I'm not supporting you financially. Right. That could not have been easy. I mean, that would have been extremely difficult. But you overcame that. Mm-hmm. And look at the blessing of having a Green Beret. Right. And what's the job of a Green Beret is kind of to protect those who can't fight for themselves, or you know what I mean? And so what a blessing I feel like that was in your life to get you to that point. Wow. That's pretty amazing.
I don't think if any one of those individual dominoes that you just mentioned, I don't think if any one of those had been missing, I don't think I would have had the guts to go through with it. I think I had talked myself out of it many, many times before. I had left once before when my oldest daughter was 6 weeks old. I left, and spoiler alert, I went back, and there were years and long stretches of time where either he was doing better or he was under court-ordered psychiatry and regular check-ins with the psychiatrist, or he would have been in contempt of court. And what brought that about was terrible, but that was a good patch because I wasn't alone in fighting this. And it wasn't just his parents, bless their hearts and God rest their souls. They both passed away at this point in time, but they covered for him. And that is not helpful in a situation. I mean, I don't need to go on a tear and a rant about domestic violence. And I know that I'm incredibly lucky that I survived. My children survived. There were no pets harmed in the making of my particular movie. He was bipolar 1, and meaning he was manic depressive. And so he had highs and he had lows. He wasn't just all high all the time. But it's terrible to love someone so completely who is going through that. And mental illness is a real thing, and it's a terrible thing, and it's heartbreaking, and it rips lives and families apart. But there is so much better medical care, psychiatric care, counseling care, and there's just so much more available to people. The step one is the desire to get help, regardless of which side of this equation you find yourself on. If you are the person who loves a person with a disability, or the person who is struggling with a mental illness, getting help, is the desire for help is absolutely imperative, because nothing else is going to work. Nothing else is going to happen if there's not the desire for help and for change.
Yeah, very, very true. Mental health is so difficult. I think, growing up, it was taboo to speak about it growing up, right?
Yes.
80s, even into the 90s, all throughout the 90s, it was just so taboo. You just didn't talk about mental health. And, if you knew someone, if you had a family member that experienced it at any level, you kind of just, hey, that stays behind closed doors. We don't talk about it. We don't bring it up. We don't bring attention to it. We'll just keep it over there, right? And so I think because of that, we are not always great at knowing how to deal with it, or knowing where to find the tools or the help that we need in order to deal with it, right? Whether us going through it, or or trying to help somebody else, get through those moments. So it's interesting to me too that you said that you were a survivor. You and your kids are survivors, and I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of your daughters. I've obviously known you for quite a few years now, and the thing that comes to mind as you were talking about that is, yeah, you probably were surviving at some point, right? But you've also been thriving since, right? Like there was a point where you probably went from survivor to just thriving. Would that be kind of a fair assessment? Or
There was a
something?
bridge. There was a bridge, and it was a wobbly one at times, where you have to hang on for dear life and watch where you're going and watch where you place your feet.
Well, let's dive into that bridge a little bit.
Okay. More prayer, constant, lots and lots and lots and lots of prayer, and just creating and strengthening my own personal roots so that I could weather this storm. Surrounding myself with people who I knew would love and listen and not judge, and really keeping that circle small and tight, because you wind up sharing with everybody, and then you don't remember who you've told what, and and it just turns into a real mess. But really having a tight circle of cherished family members or friends that love and trust is essential, so that that you're not going through this alone. For me, having an ecclesiastical leader that was right there with me, as we moved back from California and got settled into our brand new home that we had just bought. It was a spec home in Utah, and went to church for the first couple of times. I don't remember what my ex-husband, exactly what he said or where he was medically, other than I know he was on a high and not a good place. When I told my ecclesiastical leader that I had kicked him out and filed for divorce, he said, "Good. Because if you hadn't, I was going to tell you that your standing in the church was going to be threatened." And they didn't say things like that ever. But especially back then. And I thought, whoa. And I really, Eric, was trying to search through my memory, like, what did he say in that moment that made my ecclesiastical leader think or say that he was going to be driven to encourage and push me to kick him out and ask for a divorce. But I was very grateful for him standing strong, and being a voice of strength in my life. And so prayer, strengthening yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who are going to strengthen you through the journey ahead, absolutely essential. Most divorces are contested in some way, whether it's over assets, custody, both.
There's always something.
There is always something, and
A house, it could be material things, whatever it is. There's always a point of contention when it comes to divorce.
yeah, absolutely. And so I'm very grateful that mine was atypical in that sense. And yeah. So, but, and all the more if you have, if it's contested in any way, and especially if, yeah, if you find yourself being attacked and your character being assaulted, and your journal from when you were 12 years old, being paraded in an open court, or even in the media, some things are, some of these things get so crazy, messy, ugly, and awful. And all the more reason that we need to surround ourselves with the people who are going to support us and strengthen us. Yeah. And I did not have a therapist at that point, or a counselor that I was seeing. I didn't trust them at that point in my life. And it would have been so much easier and better for me to be able to navigate how my children were feeling about all of this if I had had some additional support in a clinical way that would have also been beneficial for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I just love all of these little pieces in your life that have just fit in, right? You had prayer, you had a close knit unit that you could trust, right? That you could go and speak to and probably vent, right, as to what was going on in your life. So that tight knit group. You had the Green Beret, right? You
Mhm.
had a great ecclesiastical leader that not everybody has, by the way, right? Regardless of your denomination. So I think having a great leader, ecclesiastical leader, also plays a big role. Uh,
Totally.
and then therapy, right? Finding the right therapist. I think sometimes we give up too soon on therapy because I think there's got to be a connection with the therapist. At least what I've seen in my life in trying to help other family members deal with mental health issues has been finding the therapist that they can connect with, because once they make a connection, that it just seems like that therapy goes to a different level, right? And I think that the outcomes become I think that you kind of get to the outcome maybe a little bit quicker, but I think it's all really just kind of dependent on making that connection with the therapist. So I love that you've had all of these things and happen throughout your experience to help you along and to help you to overcome that. What was the mental side of that for you? What was the thinking? What were you going through? Like, what were your thoughts going through? Because at some point, you became a single mom, right? After the divorce, now you're a single mom. You've got this amazing family that you have to continue to support and provide for. So take us a little bit into that mental aspect of your thinking. Because I'm sure that you had some dark days. I'm sure you had some days that you just wanted to just throw your arms in the air and just say forget it, right? But you also, having said that, you also have kids, you have responsibilities, you have people who are depending on you. So walk us through a little bit of that mental side of that experience that you went through.
Oh my heck. It was not all good. Um, and you mentioned my energy, and that absolutely can be a strength, and it can also be a weakness, because at that time I threw myself into everything. I threw myself into my work. I threw myself into dating right away, and not taking the time to heal, really allowing myself to heal, and then date from a whole and healthy place, and got into more than one unhealthy relationship. Not physically. I did not go down that path again. I was very, very cognizant of that. My same ecclesiastical leader told me, as I was dating, together, we built what he called a knockout list.
Oh,
And I
okay.
just shared this with a good friend of mine who's just recently gotten divorced. And she was like, wow, I never thought of it that way. That's so helpful. It was a green light, list of the qualities that I really hoped that he would have. I wanted him to be a fan of Brigham Young University football to the
Oh, yeah.
rabid
Yeah.
extent that I was. I
Yeah.
wanted him to be an amazing cook and ideally be able to make crepes from scratch, like all the things that I wanted. And I think that having that is important to allow yourself to recognize, what am I looking for? What would be like a, oh yeah, and yes. Then we've got the yellow light list of, watch for this. If these things show up, be on the lookout. And then the absolute red light, if this shows up, no more.
Yeah.
No second chances, no explain, like, we're done.
Yeah.
And having that list was very, very helpful to put up some guardrails on myself and my life so that I did not wind up getting married again to someone that would not have been good for me. And yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like you see it, right? You see it in real life. You see it depicted in movies, obviously, where somebody goes through, something like this, and then they end up in the exact same relationship, right? And just it's a different person, but the relationship is the same. They never seem to be able to break that cycle and get past it. They just continue to relive it, right? Just a different person, but they're reliving it. So I'm glad that you were able to do that. I think having that list was probably really kind of godsend because, I mean, even in my dating life, I had a red flag list, right? I wasn't really worried about the green and the yellow as much as the red. And like, man, if it was something on the red, it was like, I don't care if I've known you for an hour or if I've known you for months, we're done. Like, I'm going there, peacing out. So when I found my sweetheart, I found my sweetheart in high school because we dated in high school.
The two of you lucked out. You're so perfect for each other. You're so cute.
We did luck out. I mean, I don't think she lucked out. I think I lucked out.
I think we both lucked out.
But I think that having had that, I think had to have been a huge help. Wow, that's an amazing story of having to really overcome something and having that perseverance, right? We talk a lot about on the podcast about passion and purpose and perseverance. What was your purpose kind of all about through that time?
Getting remarried. That was my purpose. That was my purpose, my passion, and my perseverance all wrapped up into one. At that point in my life, I was still very much seeking for external validation in my career and my relationships and in every aspect of my life, really, instead of just grounding into my divine identity and being so solid in my relationship with God and allowing that to create the sovereignty in myself to attract the right man. And thank heaven I did. And talk about a godsend. I was making such a mess of my life with a couple of these different relationships that I firmly and completely believe that God sent Rick into my life when he did, how he did. Rick had been single for 5 years, and
oh wow, I did not know that.
He had been divorced for 5 years, and he was engaged to someone else. But thank heaven that didn't work out for him, so the two of us could be together. And so, fortunately, God was watching out for me, and divine orchestration all day, every day. And the problem, to add another P word in there, because I love alliteration, was that my passion and my perseverance was all about finding myself joyfully in relationship again. And that was, I was very impatient.
Wow. And there's another blessing, right? Having Rick walk into your life.
Yep. Thank heaven for that.
How old were your daughters when Rick came into your life, and what was there once mom, because I'm sure that they've seen you're dating, like you said, you've had a few relationships, what have you. So Rick comes into the picture. What are your daughters thinking about Rick? What were those conversations that you had with your daughters about Rick? And when you realized that, hey, this isn't just like a regular relationship. This isn't just one of the guys or some guy that I'm dating. This is Rick, right? You come to that realization that, hey, this could be something special. What were those conversations like with your kids, and what was their reactions when Rick comes into the picture? I'm really curious about that.
Oh boy, how long do we have? As your listeners are,
We've got a few minutes. You got to spill the tea. We all want to know.
oh, the tea is all over the table at this point. So my oldest daughter was 13 and my youngest daughter was 3. And Ashley was my oldest, was pretty vigorously against everybody. And that was largely my fault, if we're really being honest, because she was the oldest and because my ex-husband had bipolar disorder. I put Ashley in a position to co-parent with me from from a very, very early age, a role that she relished and was very, very good at. She knew how to co-parent with me. And so when Rick comes along, and now he is a solid, stable man with 5 children of his own, by the way.
Wow, okay.
I had the oldest and the youngest. Ashley felt very displaced. This is my mom. These are my sisters. This is my role. And how dare you come in here and try to tell me that and he really wanted her to be able to be a kid. I had not allowed her to be a kid enough, growing up. And it's really interesting to me, to look at that relationship dynamic now. And Bryn, a little bit less so, my second. She was 3 years younger than Ashley. And then my 2 youngest were 2 years and 2 days apart. So my youngest was 3 and my third was 5. And the 2 of them loved dad, loved stable, they didn't, especially my youngest, she didn't have any good memories with her dad, none. And so and today she's the closest to him. So it's an interesting dynamic of looking back on that from 23 years ago when we got married. We just celebrated our anniversary a couple weeks ago to today, and how sometimes those relationships are a little bit cemented in the way that we look at other people and our role in a relationship. And instead of being flexible and fluid, sometimes we get a little bit rigid in the way that we see ourselves and each other, and we are all human. And I think the greatest gift we can give ourselves and each other is to allow for growth and to look at people and ourselves with new eyes, especially as we change.
Yeah, very much so. That's amazing. I love what you said, and I hope our listeners really caught that. I love that you took that you weren't just responsible. You say, "Oh, I'll take responsibility for that," but you were holding yourself accountable for the experience from really, I think, from beginning to end. But you really brought it up when you were talking about having that accountability for your daughters and the experience that they had, and their journey, right? Because they had their own separate journey going through this as you were going through it. And so for you to be accountable and say, hey, listen, this is the place that I have to own. This is the piece that I have to own when it comes to my kids. I think that is really, really powerful. And I honestly believe that we are not very quick in our lives to be accountable for things that are our fault, that are our doing. I think it's easy for us to hold other people accountable and say, hey, you should be accountable for X, Y, and Z. But it's really, really difficult to point the finger and say, hey, I should be accountable, or I am accountable for this, even if it's a negative experience. And I think the fact that you did that, wow, I think that shows incredible growth and incredible strength. And that's really, I think, a key piece in this entire story. It's not just all the people that were brought into your life and blessed your life in one way or another, whether it's Rick, a Green Beret, your ecclesiastical leader, or whoever it was. But I think the most important piece, I would say, besides prayer, was that piece where you're willing to be accountable and to say, hey, I have to own this piece. This is on me. And then being able to say, hey, that piece is on me. I'm accountable, but let's get through it together. Let's make a life, worth remembering. Let's make new experiences. Let's create new memories, right? So let's lighten the mood a little bit and let's talk about some of the good stuff. Because here comes Rick. Rick comes into the picture. So tell us a little bit about like once that, what was that like, and tell us a little bit about the good times that you guys have had as you've had to fuse these two families together.
Oh my word. So many dumpster fires, but so much fun along the way. Rick was a very accomplished skier. And Eric, I was a very accomplished skier on my face and my behind. I was so good at that. And I did not enjoy skiing at all. I thought it was, I mean, I'm a California girl, for heaven's sake. Yeah, skiing is freezing and it's miserable and you fall down. Like, why would anybody spend so much money on the equipment and the lift ticket to go have a miserable time in the cold?
I don't get it. I don't get
Yeah. And so when very early on, like 3 days into our relationship, he told me how much he loves skiing, and he was very modest, but told me how good he is at it. And I said, I'm willing. And I remember he was so excited, like really, yeah. So early on, that very first winter when we were engaged, and he taught all of my kids to ski. And to this day, one of them loves it. My second daughter, Bryn, who lives in Las Vegas with her husband and their 4 children, they just took their 4 kids skiing as a ski vacation in southern Utah, and teaching them how to ski, because that love that he had for it translated to her, and now she's passing it along to her kids, which is so
beautiful.
fun.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
Mm-hmm. And I no longer ski on my face and my behind. Now I actually enjoy it.
That's awesome. Hey, I am so glad. Wow, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and thank you so much for sharing this amazing experience. I know that sometimes, as we share that, we kind of relive pieces of it. And thank you for being willing to do that with all of us and all of the lifers out there listening today. We really do appreciate it. Cheryl, before we let you go, what would be one piece of advice? If you had one piece of advice for all of our lifers out there, what would it be?
Ultimately, I go back, and yes, I kind of reliving it a little bit. And thank you for the opportunity to be here and share my whatever wisdom I can impart to anyone that this will help, who happens to be listening. I wouldn't have done it. I would not have done it when I did it, how I did it, if it hadn't been for one friend. One friend, my business partner at that time, who was on the front lines of my life, saw what was going on and said to me, you have 4 girls. They are watching your marriage, your relationship. Is that what you want for them to have in their lives? Is that what the kind of relationships, the kind of men you want them to marry? And Eric, it wasn't enough for me to do it for me at that time. It was not enough.
Yeah.
But it was enough for me to do it for them. And so just my final piece of advice: it doesn't matter how you get out. If you're in a situation like that, if you're doing it for your children or for someone else, but do it, and find the resources that you need in people that you love and trust, that will support you and will believe you, so that you can get out. And a step up from that is to love yourself enough that you're willing to take on the hard challenges and the hard changes and lean into the suck temporarily, because you do love yourself enough and you do know that you deserve more, and you're willing to do it for you.
That's awesome. And that is so powerful. What did you just say? Lean into the suck?
Lean into the suck.
That is awesome. I love that. What is the, because I think it's the Army that says embrace the suck, right?
Probably,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think they say embrace the suck as they're talking about basic training, but right, lean into it. And I think that you're so right. I've noticed in my in my moments of troubles and just bad experiences or what have you that I've gone through in my life, it's those moments where I can lean into the suck that helps you overcome, that helps you persevere, that helps you to find your purpose, that helps you to see the light, to be able to come up for air. It's leaning into it. I think so often we just want everything to be glorious and we want everything to be perfect and we don't want any discomfort whatsoever. We just want everything to be paradisical. Is that even a word? You know what I'm saying? We want everything to be paradise, but
Yeah.
life is not that. That's not what life is. Life is about overcoming. Life is about finding passion, purpose, and perseverance. What a wonderful story. Beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that amazing and extremely powerful experience with us. Thank you for helping us to lean into the suck in our own lives. So, so appreciated. And like I said at the very beginning of the episode, hey, you never disappoint. That was amazing. Totally awesome. So glad that you were the first guest on the Live the Life podcast.
I'm so honored. I'm so honored, Eric. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So remember, lifers, as you go out there and you overcome, remember, live the life.